Chapter 1. Normal is a lie. The hum of the garage door rising was the only sound that welcomed Bennett home. No hurried footsteps, no warm embrace, just the mechanical whine and the cold, echoing silence of a house that had forgotten he was missed. He stepped inside, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, boots leaving dry dust trails on the tile. The living room was dimly lit, television flickering with some Netflix drama. No one was watching. Julia sat on the couch, legs folded beneath her, staring at her phone. She didn't look up. "Hey," Bennett said, forcing a smile. "I'm home." A pause. Then, without looking up, Julia murmured, "Hey, long trip." He waited a moment, half expecting her to rise, cross the room, kiss him like she used to. Instead, she tapped her phone screen, eyes narrowing in concentration. He caught the way she tilted it away from his line of sight. "Yeah," he said, dropping his bag near the stairs. Bridge project in Denver dragged out. Had to re-pour one of the pylons after a crane hiccup. You know how it is. Bennett ran a hand through his hair, slightly damp from the sticky southern heat outside. "I brought back that wine you like. The cherry-flavored one. The store near the hotel had it." That made her look up, briefly. Her expression didn't shift much, just a flicker of acknowledgement before her eyes returned to the glowing screen. "Thanks." There was a time Julia would have jumped into his arms the second he walked in, kissed him on the neck, asked how the trip went, teased him about smelling like concrete and coffee. But now she looked at him like a distant roommate, a temporary guest whose presence didn't quite matter. Bennett set the wine on the kitchen counter and moved into the living room. "You doing okay?" he asked, voice gentle. She shrugged. "Fine. Just tired. Work's been nonstop." Bennett nodded, unsure how to respond. Julia worked part-time at a local graphic design firm. Nonstop wasn't really the right word. Still, he didn't push it. That night, as he unpacked upstairs, he noticed something odd. Her closet space was cleaner than before. Organized. Some clothes missing. Maybe laundry day. Maybe not. He brushed it off, trying not to let the creeping doubt latch on. Later, in bed, Julia lay turned away from him, her breathing even. Still, Bennett whispered into the dark, "I missed you." No reply. The days that followed didn't bring improvement. Julia was polite, smiling when necessary, saying the right things, but with a robotic edge that made Bennett feel like he was talking to a mirror, his words bouncing back at him with no warmth. Then Derek started showing up. It began innocently enough. Bennett walked into the kitchen one Thursday evening to find his younger brother sitting at the island, nursing a beer. "Jesus, Derek, you breaking now?" Bennett chuckled, setting his keys down. Derek grinned. "Julia let me in. Figured I'd say hi. Haven't seen you in weeks." Bennett clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, next time shoot me a text. You're lucky you're family, or I'd have decked you." Derek's smirk widened. Yeah. You wouldn't hit this pretty face." Julia appeared a moment later with 2 fresh beers, one of which she handed to Derek with a laugh that sounded just a bit too loud. "These two are thick as thieves lately," Bennett said, smiling uneasily. Julia waved it off. "Don't be jealous. You're always away. Derek keeps me sane." Bennett looked at his brother, laid back, always charming, forever unemployed, and tried to shake the feeling gnawing at him. As the weeks rolled on, patterns emerged. Julia started taking night jogs, always around the same time, 9:30 p.m., just after dinner. She claimed it helped her sleep. Sometimes, Derek would stop by just after she left, said he was dropping something off or grabbing a charger he left. Bennett started noticing details. Julia's phone now had a new password. She never left it unattended. Once, she nearly panicked when Bennett reached to check the time on it. "Don't go snooping," she'd snapped, snatching it from his hand. Her tone was playfully mocking, but her grip on the phone was iron. Then there was the perfume. She'd come back from her jogs glistening with sweat, but with freshly applied perfume. Not her usual brand. Something floral and sweet. And her hair? Impossibly neat for someone who had just run 3 miles. Bennett began to keep track. 9:30 p.m., Julia leaves. 9:38 p.m., Derek's car spotted idling near the corner. 10:50 p.m., Julia returns, flushed but dry. Hair still curled. lipstick slightly smudged. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. He didn't want to believe it. But the universe had begun whispering in his ear, and he couldn't unhear it. One Saturday afternoon, Bennett came back from a hardware store run early. He pulled into the driveway to find Derek's Mustang parked out front. Inside, Julia's laughter rang through the open window, high-pitched, breathless, intimate. He entered quietly, like a stranger in his own home. Derek and Julia were sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. Julia's legs were tucked under her, her hand resting a little too comfortably on Derek's knee. They didn't see Bennett at first. "Funny show?" he asked, voice sharp. They both jumped slightly. Julia stood up too quickly, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Oh, didn't hear you come in," she said, voice breezy. Derek raised his beer. "You should see this new YouTube guy. Hilarious as hell." Bennett looked at them, then at the untouched coffee mugs on the table, lipstick stains on both. His jaw clenched. "I'll be in the garage," he said. "Got something to work on." Neither offered to join him. That night, Bennett lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft pings of Julia texting beside him. The screen glowed against her face. She tilted it away when she noticed him watching. "Who are you texting?" he asked. "Just Megan," she said without missing a beat. "She's going through stuff with her boyfriend." Bennett nodded slowly. "Tell her I said good luck." She grunted, barely listening. A lie. A small one, but the kind that stung like a paper cut dipped in salt. Bennett turned over, facing the wall. His hands curled into fists beneath the blanket. He didn't have proof, just instincts. But something wasn't right. Something was very, very wrong. And though he didn't know it yet, everything he believed about his life was about to be ripped apart. Because sometimes what looks like stability is just betrayal wearing a perfect mask. And sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding the knife. Chapter 2. Eyes That Lie. The scent hit him before she even stepped into the room. It was subtle, expensive, sweet, and floral, but unmistakable. A brand new perfume, not the sandalwood and vanilla she used to wear. It lingered in the hallway like a stranger's fingerprint. Bennett was in the kitchen rinsing off engine grease from his hands when Julia walked in. Hair pulled back, face flushed like she'd run a mile. She smiled faintly. "Hey, babe, what's for dinner?" Bennett dried his hands on a rag and nodded toward the pan. "Pasta. Was gonna wait for you. You just get back." "Yeah," she said, moving past him. She kissed him on the cheek, brief, mechanical, and opened the fridge for a water bottle. Yoga was brutal tonight. Bennett stared at her for a moment. Her hair wasn't sweaty. Her gym bag was bone dry. And her sports bra, white and pristine, peeked from under her zip-up hoodie like it hadn't been touched by effort. But he said nothing. Instead, he forced a smile. "Glad you're keeping at it. Trying to keep this old thing in shape," she quipped, patting her hip. She took a sip of water, then walked upstairs without another word. Bennett remained standing at the sink, staring at the droplets sliding down the faucet, the faint trail of her perfume still coiling in the air behind her. She hadn't been to yoga. He knew it in his bones. That night, Julia laughed at something Derek texted her while they sat together on the couch. She didn't bother to hide the smirk on her lips, but when Bennett leaned over to see the screen, she tilted it instantly. "Just Megan again," she said quickly. Bennett's eyes narrowed. "She texts you a lot for someone going through a breakup." Julia shrugged, eyes never leaving the screen. "Girls stick together. Maybe men should learn how to do that." He forced out a dry chuckle. "I'd rather not take lessons in loyalty from your friend group." She looked at him, her expression shifting ever so slightly, surprised, maybe even insulted. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. "You're in a mood," she said and stood up. "I'm gonna shower." Bennett watched her go. Her phone, clutched tightly in her hand, went with her. 2 days later, a receipt slipped out of her coat pocket when he was hanging it by the door. At first, he bent to pick it up out of habit. Then he saw what it was, water-stained and slightly crumbled. Le Jardin Rouge. Tuesday night. 2 cocktails. 1 ribeye. 1 lobster tail. Total, $162.43. Bennett blinked. Tuesday night. She had told him she was at yoga until 9:30, then too exhausted to talk. She had gone to bed early, headphones in, facing the wall. He stared at the restaurant name again. It was one of the more expensive downtown places, known for being intimate, low lighting, soft jazz, cloth napkins, and tables for two. He remembered their last anniversary there. That had been the last time Julia wore lipstick just for him. His fingers trembled slightly as he folded the receipt and placed it in the back pocket of his jeans. He didn't confront her. Not yet, because something deeper was gnawing at him now. He needed to be sure. Bennett started taking mental notes. Her laughter around Derek was different. More live. More girlish. It echoed in a way it hadn't around him in months. Derek would say something stupid, and Julia would throw her head back, eyes sparkling. Bennett would enter the room, and the air would tighten like a pulled cord. One night, Bennett caught them standing close by the sink. Julia was showing him a meme on her phone, and Derek's hand rested casually on the counter just a few inches from hers. Too close. Too comfortable. They pulled apart when they saw him, a bit too quickly. Derek clapped him on the back. Still think your brother has the best sense of humor in the family, Jules? Julia smiled. Well, someone has to lighten the mood. Bennett gave a stiff laugh. Yeah, I'll try being more fun after 16-hour shifts. Julia's smile faded slightly. Derek chuckled and grabbed another beer. Later, when Bennett sat on the porch alone, his thoughts spiraled. Was it just paranoia? Was he seeing ghosts in his own home? He couldn't remember the last time he and Julia had gone out, had a real conversation, shared a moment that didn't feel like acting. But she and Derek had those moments every damn time they were together. On Friday night, Bennett couldn't sleep. He heard her downstairs, talking softly on the phone. She was pacing. The floorboards creaked above the kitchen. He opened the bedroom door quietly and stepped into the hallway, ears straining. No, he doesn't suspect anything, she whispered. I told him I'm going for a jog tomorrow morning. Yeah, I'll come by your place right after. A pause. Then laughter, soft and low, the kind she used to save for only him. Bennett's breath caught. He backed away, heart pounding, and slipped back into the bedroom before she returned. He lay in bed, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling fan above. Julia came back and 10 minutes later climbed into bed and turned her back to him without a word. She smelled like that same new perfume. And underneath it, faint but distinct, Derek's cologne. The next day, Bennett called in sick for the first time in 3 years. He needed time to think, to plan, to understand how the woman he married, the woman he built a life with, could look him in the eye each day and lie. Was he not enough anymore? Had the distance from work, the long hours, the sacrifices, all chipped away at the foundation of their marriage until someone else, his own damn brother, slipped in through the cracks? His mind screamed with questions, but his face stayed calm. Because something inside Bennett was changing. The man who had once trusted blindly, who gave people the benefit of the doubt, was starting to see the world with clearer eyes. The tension builds as Bennett begins to question his own sanity and loyalty. Her perfume lingers when she swears she hasn't gone out. Her laughter is louder with Derek than with him. And that receipt, that damn receipt, it sits in his pocket like a loaded gun. Chapter 3. The folder. Hey, babe. My laptop's acting weird again. Julia's voice floated in from the living room as Bennett stood at the kitchen sink, drying off his hands. He glanced at the clock. Saturday, 2:17 p.m. He had just finished cleaning out the rain gutters and was about to settle down with a cold beer and maybe watch the game. He set the towel down and walked out. Julia was curled on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, laptop open on the coffee table. She didn't look up as he approached. What's it doing now? He asked. It's just slow. Glitchy. Keeps freezing. Can you check it? Bennett crouched beside the couch and pulled the laptop toward him. You've got like 50 Chrome tabs open, Jules. She smirked. I multitask. Blame the world, not me. He chuckled and cracked his knuckles. All right, let's see what we've got. She stretched and stood. I'm going for a shower. Let me know if you fix it. He watched her disappear down the hallway, then turned his eyes to the screen. Something about her casual dismissal didn't sit right. Bennett was no tech genius, but he knew his way around a computer. He opened Task Manager, closed the unnecessary apps, and then ran a quick check. Nothing major, but something caught his attention. A folder on the desktop named Billing Archive Q1, recently modified. He clicked it. It opened to reveal several innocuous PDFs, receipts, tax statements, invoices. Except, buried at the bottom of the folder, there was a zip file named Summer Memories. That struck him as odd. Why bury a memory folder in billing paperwork? He hesitated. His heart picked up speed. He glanced toward the bathroom, shower still running. Bennett clicked. A password prompt popped up. He stared at the screen. What would she use? He tried a few basic combinations. Their anniversary date, her birth year, his name, nothing. Then he typed Derek 1986. The folder opened. Bennett blinked. The preview pane loaded slowly, like some cruel hand dragging back a curtain. The first image hit him like a crowbar to the chest. Julia, nude, back arched, her hands gripping the headboard of a hotel bed. Derek behind her, grinning like a goddamn predator. The next, her straddling Derek in the passenger seat of his Mustang, lipstick smeared, bra hanging off one shoulder, tongue between her teeth. Another, Julia wearing Bennett's favorite lingerie set. The one she had claimed was too tight now. She wore it for Derek, laughing as she snapped a selfie with her legs draped over his shoulders. Bennett's throat clenched. He stared at the images, his stomach turning to liquid fire. His hands shook. His heart thundered. Photo after photo, time-stamped. Some were from weeks ago, others from his last work trip, the one where he spent 4 days freezing on a construction site in Idaho. While he was standing in the snow, dealing with concrete and deadlines, Julia had been in hotel rooms with his brother. He scrolled further, horrified, like a man watching his own funeral. Then came the messages. Screenshots, dozens of them. Text threads saved as images. The first few were sexual, disgusting, full of lust and mockery. Derek, you looked so damn hot bent over that desk. Wish you could see your face when you moan like that. Julia, I wish I could send you a video, but he's home. God, I hate pretending. The way he kisses me makes my skin crawl now. Derek, soon, babe. One more trip, and he's gone. Then it's just us. Bennett scrolled further, breath caught in his throat. Julia, he's got life insurance, right? How much again? Derek, almost $750K. Dumbass never changed the policy. Julia, that loser won't come back from his next work trip. The hitman's all set. He'll make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Once he's gone, we'll split the insurance and be fucking rich. Bennett blinked hard, his pulse deafening in his ears. He reread the line again. The hitman's all set. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just adultery. This was premeditated murder. The woman he had shared his life with. The woman he had kissed every morning, cooked for, protected, laughed with. She was plotting to kill him with his own brother. Bennett sat frozen for a long time, the screen burning into his retinas. Rage and heartbreak twisted inside him like barbed wire. His mouth was dry. His jaw ached from how tightly he was clenching it. He stared down at the laptop. The weight of every lie, every fake smile, every whispered phone call, it all landed like a steel beam on his back. She wanted him dead, not divorced, not gone, dead. Footsteps padded into the hallway. Shower off. She was humming. He closed the folder, renamed it to the original title, exited out of the window, and cleared the history. Calm hands, trembling heart. He stood, the rage carefully buried under a layer of frost. Julia walked into the living room in a towel, hair dripping. Any luck? She asked, toweling her neck. Bennett smiled faintly. Yeah, just some cash junk. I cleared it up. Should run faster now. Thanks, babe, she said with a peck on his cheek. You're the best. He stared into her eyes for a second too long, trying to understand how someone could smile like that after writing his death sentence. She looked away, laughing at a notification on her phone. Bennett's stomach turned. What he found shatters him. Graphic, wild photos of Julia and Derek in hotel rooms. Photos timestamped during his last work trip. And worse, screenshot after screenshot of chat logs between Julia and Derek, planning to murder Bennett and frame it as a robbery. Chapter 4. The hitman's all set. The house was quiet, but Bennett's ears rang. He sat at his garage workbench, laptop open in front of him, the cold metal pressing into his forearms. The folder was open again, Summer Memories, as if taunting him with every grotesque revelation. He had gone back to it the moment Julia left for her Saturday morning yoga class, which he now knew was nothing more than a lie she wore like lipstick. He stared at the screen. That loser won't come back from his next work trip. The hitman's all set. He'll make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Once he's gone, we'll split the insurance and be fucking rich. The words bled into his skull, each syllable like a nail hammered into his chest. He didn't know how long he'd been reading, an hour, maybe two. The sun had shifted. The hum of distant traffic rolled by like nothing was wrong, like the universe didn't just flip his life inside out. But Bennett knew. Oh, he knew now. This wasn't a betrayal of the heart. It was a damn execution and planning. He reached for a flash drive, his backup for blueprints and project proposals, and inserted it into the USB port. With calm, methodical clicks, he copied the entire folder. Every photo, every screenshot, every thread. He made sure the timestamps were preserved. Then he opened a blank Word document and wrote a timeline, outlining what he found. It read more like a crime novel than a marriage. When the copy finished, he removed the drive and placed it into an empty Altoids tin in his toolbox. Next, he pulled open a drawer and grabbed a stack of glossy printer paper. His fingers trembled only once. He printed every screenshot, every explicit image. He didn't avert his eyes anymore. He'd already died inside an hour ago. Page after page spat out of the printer, stacking like a death sentence written in ink. Bennett set them down, arranging them in chronological order. A part of him wanted to scream, to punch something, to cry. But he felt nothing. Just a cold, detached emptiness, like the kind before a winter storm. His phone buzzed. Julia. Just finished class. Grabbing smoothies with Megan. Home soon. Bennett stared at the message. She had the audacity to still lie. To use Megan as a shield again, to send a heart. His thumbs hovered above the keyboard. But he didn't reply. He wouldn't tip his hand. Not now. Not yet. Instead, he turned back to the papers, packing them neatly into a file folder and slipping it into a sealed envelope. He taped it shut and wrote in block letters on the front. Private. To be opened in case of my death. He placed it in his personal safe behind the garage's storage wall, beside old tax returns and his will. The irony was suffocating. By the time Julia returned, Bennett had cleaned up. He was back in the kitchen, drying dishes, wearing the same neutral mask he'd perfected years ago in corporate meetings and construction bids. Hey, babe, she called, breezing in. Megan says hi. Bennett turned and smiled. How was class? Oh, brutal. That new instructor? Total drill sergeant. Good, he said. You need someone to keep you on your toes. She laughed and kissed his cheek. I'm starving. What's for lunch? He opened a fridge and pulled out the deli meat. Sandwiches sound good. Perfect, she said, reaching for a bottle of water. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, then quickly flipped it face down. Bennett didn't say a word. He just smiled. That night, after Julia fell asleep, Bennett stood in the hallway staring at their wedding photo. It hung just outside the bedroom door, him in a navy suit, her glowing in ivory lace caught mid-laugh. He remembered that moment. The photographer had told a joke. Julia had leaned into him and whispered, "You're stuck with me forever, mister." He ran his fingers down the frame. Guess not, he muttered. He grabbed the frame, yanked it from the wall, and shoved it into the hall closet. The glass cracked in the process. He didn't care. He was done playing the fool. By morning, Bennett was back in the garage, making his second backup, this time to a separate drive he planned to leave at a trusted friend's place. He created a new email under a burner alias and scheduled a timed send. If he didn't manually cancel it within 10 days, the entire folder would be emailed to two people, his friend Jake, a former cop, and Detective Grayson, a name he'd remembered from a neighborhood safety seminar. He stared at the settings before clicking confirm. It was insurance for his own murder. That evening, Julia came into the garage while he was cleaning spark plugs. "Hey," she said, leaning on the doorframe. "You okay lately? You've been kinda off." Bennett looked up, wiping his hands. "Yeah, just stressed. Work's been hell. That new bridge contract's a monster." She pouted sympathetically. "Want a massage later?" He studied her face. Her fake concern. The way she batted her lashes like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't plotting his death with his own brother. He smiled. "That'd be great." Later that night, Bennett sat alone on the back porch with a beer in one hand and a pen in the other. He opened his old black notebook, the one he used to use for tracking project costs, and started writing. Not blueprints this time. A plan. Not out of revenge. Not out of rage. But out of survival. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a death sentence. And if they wanted war, they picked the wrong man to underestimate. Chapter 5. The Vanishing. The plan began with silence. Not anger. Not shouting. Just quiet, deliberate movements. The kind you make when you're trying not to wake something dangerous. Bennett stood in the kitchen that night, watching Julia's purse hang off the chair. She was upstairs in the shower, her off-key humming drifting faintly down the hallway. Steam coiled at the top of the stairwell. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny black tracker. It was no bigger than a quarter, shaped like a key fob. GPS-enabled, Bluetooth-linked. Bought it weeks ago, just in case. Now it was the case. He opened the side pocket of her purse and slid it in beneath a tube of lipstick. A simple press. No sound. No sign. She'd never know it was there. An hour later, Julia curled beside him in bed, freshly showered, damp hair sticking to her neck. She snuggled up, warm and soft, as if nothing had changed. "Good night, baby," she murmured, kissing his shoulder. Bennett didn't flinch. "Night." He lay still for hours, his eyes locked on the ceiling, her breathing growing heavier beside him. He could feel her breath on his arm. The same woman who wanted him dead. By 2:03 a.m., she was out cold. Bennett slipped out of bed like a ghost. In the garage, under the cover of darkness, Bennett pulled his pre-packed duffel from behind the workbench. He had prepared it over the past week, one item at a time, never enough to draw suspicion. A burner phone, emergency cash, 2 USB drives, scanned copies of his birth certificate and ID, and a prepaid debit card loaded with $3,000. He grabbed his laptop and started the digital part of the escape. First, he opened a secure VPN. Then, using encrypted software and a legal proxy contact he'd kept from his brief contract days with an engineering firm in Arizona, he established a private trust. All of his individual investments, IRAs, stocks, crypto, and savings were transferred under the name of that trust. The name? Ash Grove Development Holdings. It sounded like a faceless shell company. That was the point. He also filed paperwork for a legal name change under sealed records in a neighboring state. Not to use right away, but to have ready if this all spiraled further. He was preparing for nuclear fallout. Next, he logged into the joint bank account. Their balance read $42,630.11. He took exactly half. Not out of spite. Not to punish her. Just fair. Just survival. He moved the funds into a separate account, then converted $10,000 of it into digital currency through a peer-to-peer platform. It would be untraceable. Then he logged into his work email and drafted a resignation letter. Short. Professional. No explanation. Before sending, he scheduled it for 6 o'clock a.m., after he'd already vanished. Finally, he shut off the phone. Not just powered it down, wiped it. Factory reset. SIM card snapped in half. He took one last look around the garage, the tools, the bike, the worn leather gloves on the hook near the door. This place had been his sanctuary. Now it was just a house where someone had plotted to bury him 6 feet deep. By 3:40 a.m., he was in his truck, idling at the edge of the neighborhood with his headlights off. He watched their dark, sleeping house through the rearview mirror. He thought he might feel pain, grief, some twisted longing to go back upstairs, crawl beside her, pretend none of this had happened. But all he felt was a dead calm. A switch had flipped inside him, and whatever part of him had once loved her, that part was gone now. Bennett drove 2 hours east to a motel tucked off a forgotten highway exit. The sign flickered vacancy in red neon. He paid in cash and signed the guest book under a fake name, Kevin Holt, then climbed the creaky stairs to room 207. He tossed his duffel on the bed and drew the curtains tight. Outside, the world looked smaller, farther away. He sat on a mattress and took a breath. No messages, no missed calls, no noise, just stillness. He reached into the duffel and pulled out the burner phone. Switched it on. The screen blinked to life. No SIM, no history. He downloaded the tracking app linked to the device he'd planted in Julia's purse. The blue dot pulsed. She was home. Good. Let her think everything was normal. Let her make the next move. At 6:02 a.m., Julia rolled over and reached for him. Her hand met empty sheets. "Bennett," she mumbled, eyes half shut. No answer. She sat up, blinking. The room was quiet. His side of the bed was cold. His phone was gone from the nightstand. She called out again, louder. "Bennett." Nothing. She threw the covers back and walked downstairs. His boots weren't by the door. His keys were gone. So was the duffel he sometimes took on long trips. Still groggy, she checked the driveway. The truck was gone. Panic bloomed, but not the kind born of concern or fear for his safety. No, it was a different kind. The kind of panic that sets in when the chessboard changes overnight. She grabbed her phone and dialed him. Straight to voicemail. She checked his location. Offline. She opened his email. Deactivated. Her stomach twisted. She called Derek. "He's gone," she said in a hushed voice. "He's fucking gone. By dawn, he's disappeared from their lives." Julia wakes up to an empty bed, his phone off, his work email disabled. She panics, but not because she misses him. Chapter 6. The authorities. The precinct hadn't changed much in 10 years. The same cracked tile floors. The same buzz of old fluorescents overhead. And the same bulletin board in the front lobby, now cluttered with fresh faces of missing people and wanted criminals. Bennett stared at it briefly before stepping toward the check-in window. The uniformed officer behind the glass barely glanced up. "Help you." Bennett cleared his throat. "I have an appointment with Detective Ron DeWitt." The officer tapped at a keyboard. "Name?" "Bennett Ridley." Something flickered in the officer's eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or maybe just the cold professionalism of someone who'd seen too many people on the edge of something terrible. "Third floor. Room 314. He's expecting you." Detective Ron DeWitt was leaning back in his chair when Bennett walked in, sipping coffee from faded Green Bay Packers mug. The man hadn't changed much, slightly more gray in the temples, but still stocky, sharp-eyed, and dressed like a guy who preferred interrogation rooms to courtrooms. "Bennett Ridley," he said, rising with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Been a long time." "Too long," Bennett said, shaking his hand. "Thanks for seeing me on short notice." Ron gestured to the chair across from him. "Anytime. Though I gotta admit, your message yesterday had me curious as hell. Urgent. Life or death. Need discretion. That kind of phrasing tends to spike my blood pressure." Bennett sat, placing the sealed manila envelope on the desk between them. "You're going to want to read everything in here," he said. "And I need you to promise me. What we discuss stays between us unless it's legally necessary to escalate." Ron arched an eyebrow. "That's serious?" Bennett nodded. "Worse." The detective opened the envelope and began scanning the documents. Printed screenshots, photos, time-stamped conversations, the whole damn trail. It took a full 10 minutes before Ron leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose. "Jesus," he muttered. "Your wife." Bennett nodded. "And your brother." Another nod. Ron rubbed his temples. "You have any idea how close this came to being a headline, Bennett? If you hadn't found this, if she'd gone through with it, hell, we'd be investigating your murder, not reading your notes in this damn office." Bennett's voice was low, cold. "That's exactly why I'm here. I need help. Quiet help. I can't go through official channels yet. Not until we're sure." Ron picked up one of the photos, Julia and Derek, half-naked in a hotel mirror selfie, middle fingers raised like middle schoolers. "And you're sure about this guy?" "The hitman." Bennett nodded again. "There are references to a payment. Names I don't recognize." Julia even discussed details. Location, alibi, what time I leave for work. They wanted it to look like a robbery, something quick and untraceable. Ron blew out a breath. "This is legally messy. Technically, it's conspiracy to commit murder, but we're in the gray zone since the act hasn't occurred. Prosecutors don't like gray zones." Bennett leaned forward. "But if we wait, I'm dead." Ron didn't answer immediately. He shuffled the papers again, then stood and walked to the door. "Give me a minute." He left Bennett alone in the room for nearly 15 minutes. Bennett sat still, listening to the faint murmur of voices outside the hallway. Every second was a reminder that he shouldn't even be here, that he should be halfway buried already. Finally, Ron returned with another man, a younger detective with close-crop hair and a tight expression. He nodded politely to Bennett, then dropped into the seat beside DeWitt. "This is Detective Salazar," Ron said. "Homicide and special threats. He's our discretion guy." Salazar began flipping through the documents. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "This is personal." Bennett didn't blink. "It's survival." Salazar nodded slowly. "All right, we can work with this, but it's delicate. We can't make arrests without direct involvement or audio recordings. That said, we can observe." "Surveillance?" Bennett asked. Ron nodded. "We'll place eyes on them. If they move toward action, hire someone, talk to the wrong person, make another payment, we move in. But we can't tip them off. Not yet. You understand?" Bennett's jaw clenched. "Yes." "Good," Salazar said. "We'll keep them under wraps. In the meantime, stay out of sight. Keep your burner clean. No direct contact." Bennett reached into his jacket and handed them a second flash drive. "Same files. Backup. If anything happens to me, I want someone to know where to start digging." Ron took it solemnly. "We'll keep you alive, Bennett. You have my word." By the time Bennett left the station, the sun was just starting to dip below the horizon. Golden light stretched across the sidewalk as he slipped into a nondescript rental car. He'd switched out his truck the previous night, just in case. Nothing traceable, nothing familiar. He pulled into a vacant lot 2 blocks away and opened his burner phone. The tracking app loaded slowly. Julia's blue dot pulsed steadily. She was on the move. A high-end salon on 5th Avenue. Then an hour later, her gym. Bennett watched the dot jump locations like clockwork. She was sticking to her routine. Or maybe acting like she was. He opened his second phone. This one linked to a microphone app he dropped into the lining of her car seat a day before leaving. Another precaution. He tapped live audio. A moment of static. Then her voice. "I know, but he hasn't called. He hasn't messaged. He's just gone. What if he suspects something?" Derek's voice came through faintly. "Then we stay cool. He's a dumbass, Jules. He's probably off sulking or working overtime. He'll come crawling back." Julia laughed. "You better hope so. We can't move forward until it's done. I want this over with. I'm tired of pretending." Bennett closed the app. His hand trembled just once before going still again. The police opened a covert investigation, legally tricky since the crime hasn't yet occurred. But the sheer detail and explicit plans in the messages raise enough alarms to assign surveillance on Derek and Julia. Meanwhile, Bennett uses burner phones to monitor her every move through the tracker. Chapter 7. The trap is set. The diner sat off Route 19, tucked between a boarded-up liquor store and a rundown auto shop. The kind of place that smelled like burnt grease and stale cigarettes, no matter how many times it changed owners. A flickering neon sign buzzed above the window. Sam's Eats, open 24 hours. Inside, the cracked red vinyl booths were mostly empty. A lone waitress wiped down the counter while a cook banged around in the kitchen. It was just past 11 p.m. when Julia walked in, sunglasses on despite the hour, hoodie drawn tight, phone in her pocket on airplane mode. She looked around quickly, then slid into the booth in the far corner. Across from her sat a man in a worn denim jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He nursed a cup of black coffee, barely looking up when she approached. "You're early," he said. Julia's voice was clipped. Didn't want to be seen. She glanced around again, more fidgety than she'd planned. The man, Detective Salazar in disguise, set his coffee down and leaned forward. "You brought it." Julia reached into her tote bag and pulled out a thick white envelope. She placed it between them on the table. $5,000 now. The rest after. He leaves for Denver Friday morning. That's your window. Carjacking. Make it clean. Salazar didn't touch the envelope yet. "You sure you want it done like that? We can make it look like suicide. Overdose. Cheaper." She shook her head. "No, it has to be violent. He needs to disappear. Make it look like someone tried to rob him. Leave a trace, but not enough to follow." Salazar studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll reach out for confirmation once the job's done. Use the dead drop like before. You'll hear nothing until it's done." He stood, picked up the envelope without fanfare, and walked out the door. Across the street, in an unmarked surveillance van, Ron DeWitt watched through binoculars, headset buzzing. "We got it," he muttered. "Audio, visual, full exchange. That envelope better have real cash, or this gets tricky." The officer beside him nodded. Tracking her phone now, she's heading back east. Julia drove in silence, her grip on the wheel so tight her knuckles were white. It felt too easy. No names exchanged, no second guessing, just cash and instructions. Still, something in her gut twisted. At home, she burst through the front door and dropped her keys on the counter. Derek was sprawled on the couch, playing Xbox with his usual smirk. "Everything goes smooth?" he asked without looking up. "I don't know," Julia muttered. He paused the game and finally looked at her. "What do you mean you don't know? You gave him the money, right?" "Yes, but he didn't ask anything. No questions. Just took the envelope and left." Derek laughed. "What did you want, a receipt?" She snapped, louder than she meant to. "I'm serious, Derek. What if he was a cop? What if we just handed our lives to a narc?" Derek rolled his eyes and stood. "You're spiraling again. Don't gaslight me." "I'm not gaslighting you," he said, throwing his hands up. "You're the one who insisted we go through with it. You're the one who wanted it violent, remember? Hell, I was just in it for the insurance money." Julia stalked toward him. "We had a plan, and now you're acting like it doesn't matter if we get caught." "I'm acting like someone who isn't going to piss his pants every time a siren goes by," Derek said coolly. "We're in too deep to back out. You want to get paranoid now? Fine, but keep your mouth shut." Julia crossed her arms. "You ever wonder if someone leaked?" Derek narrowed his eyes. "Leak?" She nodded. "Someone told him. Maybe he was expecting me." Derek stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You accusing me? I'm saying you've been careless. You talk loud. You get drunk. You're sloppy with your phone. Maybe someone overheard. Maybe," he laughed, cruel and sharp. "You think I'd rat us out? Sweetheart, you've got it backwards." She went pale. "What's that supposed to mean?" He moved closer until their faces were inches apart. "You're just pussy, babe. You think I'd do time for you? If this goes south, you're the one they'll bury." Chapter 8. The Arrest. It was a humid Thursday afternoon when the noose finally tightened. Derek's apartment smelled like stale beer and cheap weed, just like it always did. The blinds were half drawn, sunlight streaking through dust motes in the air. Julia paced back and forth in the living room, barefoot, chewing her thumbnail. She looked ragged, dark circles under her eyes, her hair thrown into a messy knot, hoodie 3 sizes too big. Derek sat slouched on the couch, shirtless, smoking lazily and watching a rear end of cops. The irony was completely lost on him. Why the hell hasn't he contacted us? Julia snapped. Derek exhaled a lazy plume of smoke. "Because he's doing his job. You paid for silence, not a live feed." Julia glared at him. "It's been 6 days. 6? You should have done it by now. Bennett's still alive." "I know it." Derek scoffed. "You know it? What? You got a psychic connection now. You need to relax. The guy's probably 6 feet under, buried off the interstate. Just wait for the payout." She ignored him and pulled her phone out. "I'm going to text him." Derek lunged from the couch and grabbed her wrist. "Are you insane? You don't text a hitman, Julia." She yanked her arm free, trembling. "Then what the hell do we do, huh? Sit here while the walls close in." The tension hung between them, thick and bitter. A second passed. Then, a knock at the door. Julia froze. Derek stiffened. For a split second, they stared at each other, uncertainty flickering across both their faces. Derek recovered first. "Relax. It's probably just Rico dropping off my edibles." He strutted to the door, threw it open, and stared into the chest of a man in a Kevlar vest marked NYPD. "Derek Adams?" the officer said calmly. "What the—" Derek didn't finish. For more officers surged through the door like a wave, one grabbing Julia before she could even step back. She screamed as she was slammed against the wall, her cheek pressed hard against the paint, wrists yanked behind her back and cuffed with a zip tie snap. "Get off me! Get off me!" she shrieked. Derek threw a wild punch, but missed. He was immediately tackled to the ground, his face ground into the carpet as another officer cuffed him. "You got the wrong people," Julia wailed, kicking against her captor. Detective Ron DeWitt stepped into view, calm and focused. Julia Bennett and Derek Adams, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights fell on deaf ears. What murder? What the fuck are you talking about? Derek shouted, trying to twist around. We didn't kill anyone. DeWitt tilted his head. That's true. You planned it. But fortunately, your hitman was one of ours. Julia's eyes bulged. What? Oh yes, DeWitt continued, almost with a smirk. Got the whole thing. The payment, the instructions, even the folder full of those lovely photos you and your boyfriend thought were so clever. Not to mention the text where you discussed how to fake a robbery. Julia's face went ghost white. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor. Derek, defiant, hissed, "You're bluffing. You got nothing." DeWitt pulled out a clear evidence bag containing the white envelope. He shook it lightly, letting the cash shift inside. Got this from the diner. Got recordings, GPS, and your sweet little murder fantasy chat logs. But please, keep talking. Every word just helps the case. Officers hauled both of them up. Julia broke, flailing. No, this is a setup. This is someone sold US out. IT wasn't supposed to happen like this. Outside, the street had turned into a flashing sea of red and blue. Neighbors peered out windows, phones out, gossip spreading like wildfire. Reporters had already begun to gather at the end of the block, some broadcasting live as Julia was dragged down the steps. Miles away, in a quiet room inside a cheap motel off the Hudson, Bennett sat on the edge of the bed, eyes locked on the muted TV. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the screen. Breaking news. 2 arrested in murder-for-hire plot in Midtown. There they were. Julia, fighting the cops, mascara running down her cheeks as she screamed at them like a banshee. Derek, cocky as ever, still trying to flash a smug grin to the cameras. But Bennett saw it. Just behind the eyes, flickering, panicked, vulnerable. The mask was slipping. He watched as the officers shoved them both into separate cruisers, the doors slamming behind them. The news anchor continued, voice flat and rehearsed. Sources say the target, the woman's husband, remains in hiding after delivering a trove of evidence to law enforcement last week. Investigators believe this was a highly orchestrated plot involving life insurance fraud and premeditated homicide. Bennett didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just watched. Julia screamed about betrayal. Derek smirked arrogantly, but fear flickered in his eyes. Chapter 9. The Fallout. 3 weeks. That's how long Bennett stayed in the shadows, off the grid, out of sight. No calls, no emails, no social media. He didn't check the news anymore. Not out of disinterest, but because there was nothing left to discover. The arrests were public. The story was everywhere. But the healing, that was private. When Bennett returned, he didn't announce it. He didn't strut or pose for the cameras. He just walked into town like a man who'd survived a car crash. Quiet, upright, eyes forward. He wore a plain navy button-up and jeans. Same work boots as always. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, but the effect was seismic. At the local grocery store, heads turned in the aisles. Old Mrs. Halverson gasped at the self-checkout. College kids stared wide-eyed from behind the Red Bull cooler. The man who'd once been seen holding his wife's hand at summer barbecues now carried the ghost of betrayal on his face like a war veteran wore a scar. At work, the reaction was more pronounced. Bennett stepped into the project manager's trailer on site. It fell dead silent. Bennett, his foreman, Kyle, blinked like he was seeing a ghost. "You're back, man." "Jesus. We didn't think." "I'm fine," Bennett said simply, hanging his jacket on the hook like he hadn't just walked out of the center of a conspiracy to murder him. The guys stood in awkward silence. Finally, one younger welder muttered, "Damn, bro." She really tried to, then cut himself off. "Sorry, that's none of my business." Bennett looked at him evenly. "It's fine." Another guy clapped his back. "Good to have you back, man. We got your back too, for whatever it's worth." Someone brought him coffee. Another offered a cigar. They didn't say much, but the way they looked at him said enough. Respect. A different kind than before. Not the nice guy, loyal husband kind. This was something harder, sharper. the kind given to someone who went through hell and didn't break. Later that week, Bennett stood outside his old home, the one he and Julia bought together 6 years ago. The yard was unkempt. The porch lights were still broken. Derek was supposed to fix them months ago. Funny, the neighbors across the street peeked from their curtains. The Andersons next door gave him a half-wave from the driveway. They used to roll their eyes when Julia threw her loud wine parties. Now, Mr. Anderson took off his cap and said, "Sorry for what happened, Bennett. That woman, she didn't deserve you." Bennett just nodded and turned the key. The house smelled stale. Her scent still lingered faintly, floral and artificial. It clashed now with the scent of rot and lies. He didn't stay long, just grabbed a few things from the attic. His late father's tool set, the photo album from their early days, the real ones, and an old book his mother had given him. Everything else, he'd leave it behind like a skin he'd shed. Then came the letters. They started arriving the next Monday. The first was a thick envelope, marked from the county correctional facility. Inside, Julia's handwriting, overly neat as if practiced. "Bennett, I know you probably hate me, but please, let me explain. I was scared. I didn't mean for it to go that far." He didn't finish the letter. He didn't need to. By Friday, there were 4 more, each one more desperate than the last. "We can fix this. We can heal. It was Derek. He manipulated me. I wasn't myself. I was lost. You were always gone for work, and I felt abandoned. Do you remember our trip to Maine? The cabin by the lake? That was real, wasn't it? We can find our way back. Please." Bennett never replied. He didn't even open the 5th letter. It went into the same drawer. Unread, untouched, buried like she would have buried him. The 6th came 2 days later. It was soaked, maybe from her tears, maybe from guilt. Or maybe she'd just learned to fake vulnerability so well it leaked through the envelope. He didn't open that one either. Julia's family reached out too. Her mother called his office 4 times. "Bennett, please, she's not herself. You know how emotional she gets." Her father sent an email. "She was always impulsive, but murder? That was Derek, surely. Please don't punish all of us." Bennett read that one, then deleted it. These were the same people who used to call him just a worker. The man who wore steel-toed boots to family dinners while Derek wore $500 cologne and told stories about clubs he couldn't afford. Funny how quickly condescension turned into desperation. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Bennett walked into a gray brick building on 8th Avenue. "Appointment with Ryan Chong," he told the receptionist. The woman nodded and buzzed him through. Chong stood as Bennett entered. Slim, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit, the man was as efficient as he was discreet. He offered a firm handshake and motioned to the leather chair opposite his desk. "Bennett, I've been expecting you." Bennett sat, placing a thick folder on the desk between them. "I want it finalized. No delays." Chong nodded. "Divorce papers are ready. Full dissolution. We'll ensure the asset transfer stays within your trust. She can't touch a penny. We'll also block any alimony based on the criminal proceedings." Bennett didn't smile. "Good. Any interest in pursuing damages? Emotional distress? Attempted homicide?" Bennett looked out the office window. The sun was just beginning to peek out from behind the clouds, casting a golden strip across the rooftops. He shook his head. "No, I'm not dragging this through the mud. I'm not letting her have one more second of my life." Chong respected that. They got to work. Signatures, notaries, copies made. The last signature Bennett made was bold, firm, like a full stop at the end of a brutal chapter. He stood, shook Chang's hand again, and left the office without another word. Bennett read none of the letters. Instead, he visited his lawyer to finalize the divorce. Chapter 10. The Lesson. The morning fog clung to the coast like a whispered secret. Salt air tangled with the scent of pine and seaweed, drifting lazily over the small town of Seabrook. Bennett stood on the weathered wooden deck of his modest home, the sun just breaking the horizon, casting gold over the restless waves. Here, far from the city's harsh glare and the wreckage of his past, he had found something close to peace. The house was simple, a single story, with peeling white paint and windows framed by sea blue shutters. Inside, the hum of a laptop filled the quiet rooms as Bennett managed his remote startup, helping young engineers build sustainable software. He had traded the roar of construction sites for the steady pulse of coding sprints and virtual meetings. But the work wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about legacy, about building something that outlasted pain. That morning, Bennett's phone buzzed, a text from one of his mints, a bright-eyed coder named Jesse, asking for career advice. He smiled softly, typing back a thoughtful reply, then leaned back his chair to look out over the water. He thought about how far he'd come. 6 months ago, his world had been shattered. The woman he trusted, loved, and shared everything with had stabbed him not just in the back, but straight through the heart. He remembered the shock, the sleepless nights, the ache that had nothing to do with physical pain, but everything to do with betrayal. The loss of marriage was one thing. The knowledge that the person who vowed to stand beside him had planned his murder, it was something else entirely. But now, here, he was learning to live again. Bennett pushed himself up and stepped onto the gravel path that led to a small fire pit nestled near the edge of the property, overlooking the rocky shoreline. He carried a thick envelope, the final letter from Julia, still unopened. He'd found it buried in a drawer weeks ago, tucked beneath old insurance papers. A last desperate attempt at contact. But Bennett wasn't the same man who had once crumpled at her words. He was stronger now, forged by fire and loss. He kneeled beside the pit and pulled out a box of matches. The envelope was worn, the ink on the address slightly smudged from moisture. His fingers trembled for a moment. Old habits die hard, but he struck a match, the sulfur snapping sharply. The flame flickered, then steadied. He held it to the corner of the envelope. The paper caught quickly, curling at the edges, turning brittle and black. He watched the fire consume it, the smoke swirling upward like dark whispers dissolving into the morning air. As the last of the letter turned to ash, Bennett spoke aloud to the empty sky, his voice low but steady. Some people don't break your heart. They aim to kill your soul. The moment you stop loving them is the moment you survive. The words hung there, raw and unfiltered. He felt the weight inside him lighten just a little. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Bennett went inside and booted up his laptop. He opened a video call with Jessie. "Hey, Bennett," she smiled. "How's the coast?" "Quiet. Good for thinking," he replied. She hesitated. "You know, you've been a great mentor. I just wanted to say thanks. And if you ever want to talk about anything outside of code, I'm here." Bennett felt a flicker of warmth. He nodded, grateful for the genuine connection. "I might take you up on that," he said. Throughout the day, Bennett reflected on the past, the rage, the grief, the loss, and how it had forged something new in him. The betrayal had been brutal, but it had also forced him to reclaim his life, to rebuild his identity not around the woman who tried to destroy him, but around the man he had always been beneath it all. He was learning to trust again, not blindly, but with careful consideration. He was learning that loyalty didn't mean surrender. That respect was earned, not demanded. And most importantly, he was learning that survival wasn't just about living. It was about rising. That night, as waves crashed softly against the rocks below, Bennett sat on his porch with a journal in hand. He wrote slowly, deliberately. "I lost much, but I refused to lose myself. The future isn't about forgetting the past, but about building beyond it. For every wound, there is strength. For every lie, a truth waiting to be reclaimed." He closed the journal and looked out toward the horizon where sky met sea. A soft breeze stirred the pages of the book beside him, a new book, unopened, full of blank pages. Bennett smiled faintly. The fire had burned away the last piece of Julia's words, but in its place, something new was growing. And with that thought, he stood, shoulders squared, eyes bright with quiet determination. The betrayal had come like a storm, but he was the one who had built the shelter.